it's good to get an interview. So for that, you have to again reach out to people, probably get some referrals, keep applying, because interviews again gives you lots of insights on what type of questions they will ask. And again, like skill building will keep happening even after you join the job. Like it's not like you have to be
Mm.
like completely ready before you get the job. Like probably you know the basics, and then once you get the job, you still are learning, and then you can keep learning while you're doing the job. So yeah, I think the best way to go is like keep applying, get interviews, and keep building those skills.
Welcome to the Job Dictionary podcast. Today, I have the honor of interviewing Rohit Jadhav to learn about what it's like to work as a data engineer at Amazon. Rohit, welcome.
Hey, thanks, Joaquin. Uh, it's glad to be here. I guess I think you reached out to me on LinkedIn. So I was just wondering what this is about, but then I kind of looked on about job dictionary. It seems like a pretty cool thing to do, and I think this
Yeah,
is my first podcast, so pretty excited what it is like to sit in a podcast and then discuss about things. So yeah, thanks for inviting me.
absolutely. And we're really looking forward to your insights, especially in such a high demanded job like data engineering, especially today after like the AI boom. And kind of three questions we love to start off with, Rohit. The first one, in your own words, what do you do? Second one
So,
is, where do you live? And as a kid, what did you want to be when you grow up?
okay. So what do I do? Currently, I'm a data engineer. So basically, data engineer is you can take an analogy like we usually call data pipelines. Uh, so data pipelines are something which you build to m- move data from one place to another. So the analogy that I like to think of is like a plumber. So if you think data is water, so something like a plumber who comes to your house and then uh,
Mm,
make sure water flows from your the main central place to your house. So that's what data engineer does, and that's what I do. I make sure like data becomes available for people working in our organization. And the second question I think was where do I live?
yes.
Currently I'm in Redmond, Washington. So I work in Seattle. My office in Seattle, but I live in Redmond. It's a pretty good place. Like Seattle is beautiful, and yeah, it's nice here. And I think the third question was what?
Is as a kid, what did you want to be when you grew up? Did you know you wanted to be a data engineer?
No, for sure. So I think as a kid, I always wanted to become a cricketer. I used to like cricket. So I always dreamt of becoming a cricketer, but that I was just pretty decent at it. Never got a chance. Never pursued that. So yeah, that was my dream job when I was growing up.
How long have you been working in the field of data engineering?
So I got graduated from A&M in May 2021, and then I started working in Amazon as a data engineer. So I think it's been this May it will be 3 years. So it will be 3 years that I'll be working as a data engineer.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And what made you get into data engineering? How did you first get your start?
Yeah. So like how did I get interested into data engineering? So when
Mhm.
I came here for the master's, so previously I did my bachelor's in electronics telecommunication, did a job in India for like 2 years in SAP. I was a technical consultant there, but always wanted to explore more options. I would never thought like I'll become a data engineer when I came here, but I remember like when I came to masters, like I was doing a masters in first semester, there was a subject on the DBA, advanced DBA, and that kind of gave me like I did a project there, and I really thought like it's a very interesting thing to do. And I guess at the same time, I was also looking for jobs. So I was just searching through job market, what kind of jobs are coming up, and that's where I was just researching, and I found like data engineering is something which is like a job where you have a high probability of getting into. So in those
Mm,
terms, like that was my thought process. Like I should be get into data engineering, but luckily I also started liking it a lot. So yeah, that was basically the idea.
gotcha. And Rohit, do you think there are certain degrees or certifications that are truly required to get to this job?
Uh, it's not necessary to be honest, like to get started as an entry level, but skills, yes. Like when you say hard skills, like you differentiate basically some soft skills which are like very generic, which are overlapping across any job you do, like teamwork and then communication and stuff like that. But when it comes to data engineering, there are certain hard skills for sure. I think you should be good at. Do you want me to list those down, like what skills?
Yeah, that would be super insightful. Absolutely.
I think one is for sure SQL. So SQL, to just simplify, I think it's a query language that you use to get information or query databases. So SQL for sure is one of the important skills that you need to have. Second, I would say data warehousing. Data warehousing has been there for a very long time now, but still it's very relevant. It's all about reporting, dashboards, and KPIs that businesses use to make strategic decisions, right? So the back end, how do we structure the data so that the people can get that information correctly? So that
Mm.
analytical database. So that's data warehousing is second skill. I would say like it's very important.
Yeah.
Third, it comes to data modeling, probably. It's again a technical term, but again, it's all about structuring the data. So, data warehousing modeling is different from how do we model data for a transactional database. Like, probably if you want to create a database so that you can do bank transactions. So, these kind of skills, right? It helps.
Hmm.
And these are very important skills. And apart from that, I think there are new things like it's an evolving field, right?
Right.
You all say data is a new also there is a lot of investment going on in building tools and technologies around data that helps to extract value out of data. So Spark and then learning these new technologies is also important. But again, these are tools that will keep evolving. These are like fundamental skills you need to have. Data modeling, SQL and data warehousing. So I think yeah, let's stop it at because I don't want to stretch it too long.
No, yeah, absolutely. And do most people learn those, through university, or is that something you can, do through like online programs or maybe certifications?
Yeah, I think it's all again, it's about skill. It's not necessarily you have to go to a university and have like, but what happens is like for someone, a newcomer, right, who wants to do something or learn something, there is a lot of information out there. So it becomes very difficult for a person to figure out what to learn unless until they have like a specific guidance. So universities and certifications help you to kind of narrow down what topics you should learn
Mm.
and then you become because I think that's important. Like that's very great because I had made that mistake. I was at the start of my master, I was learning so many things, but then I met people, and then that guidance helps you a lot because your time and effort is important. So where do you put those time and effort? So I think university, if to look at from that perspective, as an objective, it's all about skill. Like you are getting a skill which makes you ready to do a job in a corporate environment. But how do you get that skill? You can do it on your own, but probably you might not be able to narrowly uh, understand like what topics do I learn. That's where university certification helps. So yeah, I think that's my kind of probably not a clear view on it, but I will. It's you need to think in that direction, like gain skill, but how to do it? Probably can do it with certification courses, whatever suits you. But it depends from person to person.
Gotcha. And are there any job titles that this position goes by, like data engineering, or is it just mainly just data engineering, data
Right
engineer?
now, yeah. So you're. I think to understand your question, you said like if there is any specific term with which these jobs are available or listed on platforms, right? Is that a right
Yeah,
question?
basically. So is it mostly just like data engineer, or is it like data scientist? Or is it like how blurry is that line?
So it's been like it has formalized over a period of time because so if you think of software engineering, right, it's been there long back when data was there. So those terms with software engineering have formalized over a period of time. But I think data is still new. Probably it was something 2007, 10 is something. Data was there, but never was formalized as a job because before data was not that data was not getting created at that level and companies didn't realize that data can be valuable. But I think
Mm.
after now it's getting formalized. So to answer a question, when we say like data, right? So data field as an overall ecosystem, you can say, or an industry, there are specific roles, and these roles are different. But again, uh, even we you formalize a definition for each of them, the definition changes from a company to company, and even it changes from a within a company also from a project to project. The roles and responsibilities might change, but to still give you a like a differentiation, you start with a data engineer who is like engineering things like building stuff. So they build data models, they build data pipelines so that unstructured data
Mm.
gets created into a structured data. Then you have data analysts or business analysts who use that structured data to create information like reports,
Yeah.
dashboards, and stuff. But parallel to data analyst, now you have data scientist. So data
Mm.
scientists again are the one who are leveraging the structured data to build machine learning models, data science models, because that's a parallel branch that's going. Because data ML models and dashboarding, these are used by leaders to basically make strategic decisions, right? At the end of the day, you have to make a decision at the leadership level to take your business forward. So this is how I will kind of structure it: data engineer, data analyst, data scientist, parallel. So that's the idea.
Yeah, that's super insightful. Thank you, Rohit. Because I've always asked myself that question, like,
Yeah.
what is the differentiators between those kind of positions? And so, Rohit, if you could just tell me a little bit of what a day in the life is like as a data engineer. What is your start, end time? What percent of the time are you doing solo work versus maybe like doing team meetings? Are you remote, in office, or hybrid? Like, educate me a little bit more about kind of like the day in the life.
Sure. Let me, yeah. So my experience, again, this is very subjective, my experience, because things will differ from person to just wanted to make a note of it, like, because, but still, like, to give an idea about what my day to day looks like as a data engineer. So before I used to work in a team. So again, Amazon is a huge company, right? So the culture changes from team to team. So the one way a data engineer works in one team, probably that might not true the other team. So I'll talk about the current way I work. So in terms of the my work location, it's hybrid. So currently, I think Amazon has this like 3 day we work in office, 2 day we can work from home. So that's the idea. In terms of what I do as a data engineer, I think most of the time goes into planning a lot. Like we think like the hard skills as I mentioned, but probably you might
Mm,
not use those hard skills that often as we think, because in a corporate it's more about like you take requirements from a sister team and then you understand those requirements, and that is the crucial part. I think I'll probably say it's 60 to 70% of that, like
mm,
your communications, you understanding what the other person needs, and then you start implementing. That's where your hard skills come into the picture. uh, but yeah, like we do in sprints. So, and as an agile methodology, we do sprints 2 weeks. Every sprint, we basically create tasks on ourselves. So that's something which are like in Amazon, at least we like a engineer also works from end to end. Like it's not like if you're an engineer, you should only work. You get a task and then do it. It's not that you have to create a task. You have to create an quarterly epic so that you need to have that forward thinking, how to plan and stuff. You have to meet stakeholders and stuff like that. So yeah, I think sprint tasks, and then sprint, you get multiple sprints, you create an epic which you track over a quarter, and then you keep reassessing. Okay, what went wrong? You do retrospect every 2 weeks to understand what went wrong, and then you work iteratively so that if you are given a project which spans over months, so you are responsible to break it down, and then the management also helps. Like the
yeah,
management is able to help you out to give a bigger picture. But that specific, like typically a day could be like in for a data engineer, at least in Amazon I know. But again, these things very subtly changes from team to team. Probably a different team might have a different culture where it's not that management inclined. Like you don't have to put that much efforts. Probably you are more have to be tech savvy and then do those tech savvy things in your day to day. But yeah, I
gotcha,
think from my experience, that's how the day goes.
gotcha.
Did I
And
miss
what?
any other questions? Yeah,
Yeah,
sorry.
absolutely. And what are those specific tasks that you're mentioning that you have to do? Like, what do you spend most of the majority like of your day doing when you are doing those tasks?
Uh, so let's assume, like I'll give an example. Let's say we start a project. Okay, we are assigned a project which probably after an estimation goes like it's something which it will take probably 2 months. That's the estimation we have committed to. And as a data engineer, typically type of work that you do is like you go with like someone has come, like there's a data scientist who said like I want to build this machine learning model. So
Mm,
you work with the data scientist, you understand what kind of data do they need. So you do a research because they have their own business terms, right? There will be terminology. You need to understand those. You need to have a clear understanding what data that you will give to
right.
them. So typically it's a data set, what we call a table, like with rows and columns. That's a typical thing, but it could be a file also, a CSV file, whatever. So you need to understand that data requirement. Once you're clear with that, then you start scouting for data. Like where do I get this data from? Because there will be other teams who are generating this data. So typically, like the management helps you to get in contact with those people. So
Mm,
you
hmm.
work with the sister teams. You understand what tech stack they are using. and then see, okay, this person using data and storing in this format, the other person is storing. Then you plan out how do you get that data, and once you get that data, then you start building out. There is a lot of tech stuff again. You have to convert the data, transform data, and then
Right.
you provide that data. Again, these are like very simplified version because there are a lot of consideration about security and then governance about how do you share the data and stuff like that. But
Hmm.
this is the overall picture. Like I'm giving an example in terms of how a project looks like typically, and then this you have to then break it down into sprint. So first
Right.
sprint I goes to requirement analysis and stuff like that. So yeah, I think if I answered your question,
Yeah,
probably.
absolutely. Yeah, and that is very insightful. And what are those tools and technologies that you use as part of the job? Like, what are like maybe like the software that specifically that you use like mostly in your day to day?
So every company has their in-house tools. So Amazon also has its in-house tool, but I think Amazon is very open in terms of like it's not technology bounded. Like the independence of using technology again differs from team to team. So that's a very good thing. Anyone can use anything they want as long as you get the job done. So in
Mm,
my team particularly, we use AWS technology. So that's the cloud services. So in terms of storage, you have S3, S3 Redshift. These are very popular tools for data warehouses. Then for processing data pipelines, we have Glue is one of the technologies. There is Spark, which uses like Apache Spark is one of the data processing frameworks that we use. Uh, then we have also have there's a mix of technology actually. So we also have a small scale, like small amount of like custom scripts that processes data. We use Airflow for orchestration. So just to kind of give a summary, in any data engineering tech stack, you will always find an orchestration tool which kind of orchestrates which things will run at what time. There will be a data processing tool which will actually process the data, compute related to that, like something like EMR or Spark, Glue. Then you will have a storage for sure because you need to store that
yeah.
data. So something like flat file storage like S3, or you have a data warehouse like Redshift. So these three are like a core thing that you'll find across, like irrespective of whatever data engineering things you work. So these things are very important. Over that, there are again like small things that you'll always add on. But yeah, an
Gotcha.
orchestrator, data storage, and data processing. Yeah.
Yeah, and which parts of those jobs that you've been mentioning are particularly most exciting to you, and which ones are maybe more, or maybe just harder, emotionally challenging, or just boring?
Uh, for me, I think I like from a data modeling point of view. I love modeling data just to know like you have a raw data which is like unscattered, and then you have to structure it in a way. It's very similar to, for instance, you have lots of photos, right? Like when you click a lot of photos on your phone, but then you go and then store it in your desktop. Then it's up to you how you want to organize those folders. So do you want to organize based on the location that you have went, or you want to organize based on year when you click that photo? So that's kind of a thing, like thought process you have to go through, right? So that's data modeling, but more technical when you do that. So that's one part I love to do. But
Hmm.
apart from that, I think what excites me is like it's about like in Amazon we usually do MBRs and stuff, right? So there you get to know, okay, now it has really added some value apart from, because when you do technical stuff, you really don't know what value is going to add to the end user, right? So
Mm,
that really excites like that it creates some sort of value. In terms of boring, I think meetings are typically boring. Like if some meeting is not really going somewhere, and after COVID, I think there is a lot of virtual meeting that nowadays I think we have streamlined a lot. But again, that depends on team and team. So I think that's the boring part, at least for me.
gotcha. Yeah. And you mentioned you were hybrid, Rohit. So are you able to leave when you are, at the office and when you go into the Amazon office, are you able to leave your work at home? I'm sorry, in the office, or do you have to take some home?
Yeah, I think it always spills over for sure. It always spills over. Sometimes it spills over weekend, but again, it's up to an individual how they manage the task. So at least like in the team that I work or the in Amazon in over in general, I've observed there is very lot of flexibility in terms when you want to work. So it's up. It depends a lot on your individual way of managing things. For me personally, for me sometimes it gets spilled over, but I try to allocate time in my calendar to do work because you have to balance between meetings and work. So a lot of days you will feel like you have just attended meetings and you haven't really worked anything.
Yeah.
So for like the way tactic that I use, like I just do a meeting invite for myself so that I know, okay, this is the time I'm not going to do any meetings, so I'll be just
Yeah.
working. So
Gotcha.
yeah. So again, to answer your question, like if we take that home, like work back to home, it happens. Again, depends on very much on how an individual manages that.
And would you say, as in general, for most of the data engineering industry, would you say that it's flexible hours and most companies have like a remote or hybrid setting as well as like in work and in the office?
To be honest, like I've been in only in Amazon as a data engineer, but from what I've heard, like it's pretty flexible all over. Like most, at least in the bigger companies, like I don't think it's very stringent. Like you have to be
Mhm.
work for a specific hours and stuff like that. I believe I like to believe too. Like it's pretty flexible.
Gotcha.
So, but I think if terms of work-life balance, again, it's a very question that is subjective. Like you can't really comment on that. Like work, if you're asking about work-life balance, if that's the thing. But yeah, I think that's something I feel like it should be
Depends
flexible.
on the
Yeah,
project, on the company.
yeah.
Gotcha. And are there any busy seasons for this job, would you say? Like, is it just kind of project dependent, or would you say there are specific parts of the year that are busiest?
Uh, I think so. So at least in Amazon, right? It's a retail company, so e-commerce company. So I think holiday season becomes like a peak season for us. So we do peak handling. I think couple of months back. So those times are always like pretty critical. Not in terms of how much development you will do, but if something were to go wrong, then you have to be very alert at that time. You have to resolve those issues pretty quickly. So those times are pretty critical, at least from e-commerce industry point of view. But again, Amazon has their prime days also. So those time are also like peak
Yeah.
days for us. But again, like it depends again what kind of job family you are in. So for data engineers, right? Again, we are not customer facing. So maybe our job doesn't impact. It impacts obviously in some way or other,
Hmm.
but we don't have to be that alert as compared to someone who is working like in, let's say, on a front end of Amazon web page, someone who's handling the front page or someone is handling the payment gateway for Amazon, a
Yeah.
team which, so those team has to be very on high alert on those times because that impacts business directly.
Hmm.
But again, yeah, those seasons I will say, like to answer your question, I think those seasons are like peak seasons for Amazon at least. But again, that depends on industry to industry. Maybe for a company which belongs to a different industry, maybe for a finance company, it might be the tax year or like the financial end of financial year. So again, that depends on which industry a company belongs to.
Gotcha. Yeah. And is there something that you would say people underestimate about being a data engineer?
Uh, when you say underestimate, as in terms of like, I probably didn't understand that question.
Yeah. So we also ask typically like, what is something that people overestimate about this profession?
I think it's very personal thing, right? Because if you are a person who likes dealing with data, or not only like you have those investigative uh, things, right? Like probably like to investigate something. So I think analyst, you can deep dive into data to just find answers. So that becomes exciting. For me as an engineer, as a general, like an engineer, you like to build things. Like you, if you were to build, you will get that happiness. Like okay, you have built something. So I think in particularly data field, if you are into that person, I think in that terms, I think we kind of tend to, at least in data, right? Like we want kind of tend to think everything is same, like because it's a very common term which is used for marketing, data this, data that. So people
Mm,
kind of miss the nuance of what data engineering is, what data scientist is, or what analyst is. But I think if you understand it, probably that's something gets. That's why I think it feels a bit underestimated in that sense. Like, but again, it depends on like what you really want as a like at an individual level. If you really like those things, probably yeah, data engineering is a fun thing to do.
gotcha. Yeah. And is there anything, Rohit, that you would say is like generally overhyped for like specifically for data engineering?
As of now, what I see is like tools, like the focus on tools, because I think a new person like who's trying to become a data engineer or getting into data field,
Hmm.
And if you were to just search like about data, you will find lots of tools. Learn this, learn that, learn this tool. But I think that's probably lot hype because again, currently data is like the most biggest investable domain for a VC or for a lot of startups. So if you see there are a
Right.
lot of startups coming in data domain because again there's a lot of potential there. But again with that comes like there is also noise, lot of noise. So you have to navigate through that noise. So probably just avoiding that hype of using tools like this tool is going to. There's a lot of promise you will see like this tool is will solve this thing. This tool will solve this thing. Just to navigate through, just go with fundamentals. Like as I said, like SQL, understanding the
Mm.
basic fundamentals of data will help long term. Probably it will take time, but in long term, probably you'll build skills which will not only help you get job, but also excel in that job. If you really want to like become a data engineer, so
Yeah.
that's a
Yeah. And in basketball terms, it would be like work on your dribbling and layup skills before trying to shoot three pointers. You know, like
yeah,
work on the basics.
exactly.
Gotcha. And Roy, you kind of mentioned it a little bit too. What is the fast? So if somebody wanted to get into data engineering, right? What is the fastest way for somebody to get into this profession? Especially if you're someone who is coming from a non-traditional background and like all you want to do is get your foot in the door.
So I think from my personal experience, even I had like when I joined it, I had no idea about what data engineering is or not even data because I worked in a proprietary software. So SAP is a proprietary software. I did my bachelor's completely in electronics, so there is nothing related to coding or anything that I did. But like one thing that I think personally had helped me is like a lot of time it's always good to be updated about job market. So it's one thing to learn on your own, but most of the times if you were to learn something things which are not really helpful for the current job market, so ideally it's good to be updated about job market, and the best way to be updated is to get in touch with people. Like if you were to
Mm,
just go on LinkedIn and then search data engineers, you will get a lot of data engineers. Ask them. I think most of them will help you out for sure. uh, Ask them questions like what are the skills should I do, what is something which, and I think after you kind of go through a bunch of people, you will find some overlapping things that everyone is saying, so those things are probably true. Those are not like biases or like not a individual experience thing. That is probably true for the job market, and I think that's how I figured out like SQL, data warehousing, and these are fundamental skills like you have to be very good at. And once you do that, I think the fastest way to get it is like job, right? If you're asking like fastest way to get
yes.
a job is like to get as much as interview as possible, because you have most of the time you have to do it parallelly. You are building your skills, but it's good to get an interview. So for that you have to again reach out to people, probably get some reference or keep applying, because interviews again gives you lots of insights on what type of questions they will ask. And again like skill building will keep happening even after you join the job. Like it's not like you have to be
Mm,
like completely ready before you get the job. Like probably you know the basics, and then once you get the job you still are learning, and then you can keep learning while you're doing the job. So yeah, I think the best way to go is like keep applying, get interviews, and keep building those skills parallelly.
gotcha. And would you say that there are fields that people are coming from before getting into this profession? Is it random or are there themes? Like do people typically come from a certain industry or from a certain job before they go into data engineering?
Again, I don't have like a statistical sample size to give a very right answer about it, but again, a very personal experience from what I have seen. So not necessarily for sure. Like it doesn't matter. Like if you are coming from even a remotest field which is not related to engineering or technical, but again, engineering again the it's about like what do you really like if as a data engineer the basic thing is about engineering is about building things. So if you really like building things you will enjoy it. And I think typically people who did engineering that helps them because and continue to do that means they really like it. So that gives you an edge for sure. But that doesn't mean like you have to come from a particular industry to become a data engineer. It's again, I was basically managed to do that in my first year of my masters because again I had no clue about coding that much. I never did coding because I was into electronics and telecommunication. Did a technical consulting job for the first 2 years. But again, like I really liked it, and anyone can basically, if you are interested, you can build those skills.
Gotcha. And so what kind of this is I think a really important question and that you've alluded to it a little bit. But what does somebody have to be good at and like doing in order to be good at this job? Like what kind of has to come easily to you?
Kind of more of an abstract skill that you can think of, right? Like, is that like, because I think in terms of hard skills, as I mentioned, those are those hard skills you need to develop. But intuitively, if you are good at, again, engineering, like as I keep focusing on the word engineering, I think if you are good at building things like logical reasoning and building things, probably you have a higher chance of succeeding into also data engineering. But
Mhm.
again, probably I won't be able to give a very specific answer to it. Even I'm thinking on the go now. But it's a very interesting question. Like, what kind of things that you should be good at? Uh, Again, data. Like, I feel like this investigative thing, right? Like, some people are really interested about to find answers. Like, if you were to give them basically a book, they will probably try to find answers from the bit. They're very good at it. So I think
Mhm.
those type of skills, it's very relevant with information in general and data, because data at the end becomes information, right? So finding patterns in data, because I think that's one of the key things that you have to do while building data models, like to understand how do you structure that data into uh, something which can be used as an information. Again, a vague answer, but I think on those lines, I will like to summarize.
Mhm.
Probably, thing is engineering. If you like to build things, because you have to build pipelines, and again, something like logical reasoning, where you want to reason something and then get answers out of it. So those could be some things probably you can look for if you want to think, no, okay, whether I would like data engineering or not.
Gotcha. Yeah. And how long does it take for somebody to get really good at this job? Like, how long did it take you to feel more comfortable in being like saying like, okay, like I kind of am getting the hang and I'm a data engineer.
For me personally, I guess I did a lot of hands-on project when I was in doing a master's. So I think I was pretty like when I did my interview, I was pretty comfortable during my interview. I didn't feel like my interview was that difficult. But again, my interview was like a student's job, so probably that interview was also not that difficult in general. But uh, again, how long it takes, it depends from a person to person. And also it depends on, not even if you want to learn a lot, I maybe if you're in a company which is not that, like where data engineering is not a big part of their budget, because again, company depend like how many data pipelines are they building, so probably you won't get that much exposure or experience in those companies.
Mm,
So probably it'll take more long to become familiar to those data engineering concepts or data engineering in general. So how long, you can't really answer that question, because it will depend on a lot of factors. Uh, but what as a person you can do to become good very quickly is something, keep doing hands-on, because I think playing around with how to build data pipelines, right, there are a lot of nuances into it. So once you get understanding of nuances like of those, right, that's where you can say, okay, now you become comfortable. Now anyone can give you any problem. You can probably at least get started on it. So and then I think one thing I wanted to add is like how I think is like if you want to be really clear about it. So it's kind of a layer. So most of the starting in data engineering will always think about how to get data, how to transform it, how to write SQLs, and how to create a table. So that's like the first level of thinking. But as you grow in that role, you'll also think about, okay, it's not about getting data, but also like how do I manage the access, like who should get that data, or managing the security of it, whether the data will be encrypted or not, whether I'm dealing with high classification data, whether it's a confidential data or a public data. So in that case, what kind of architecture I need to use, which is compliant, and if my data were to fail, how do I backfill the data, making sure my data is of right quality. So having some sort of a measures to have that. So that becomes like that comes as you grow, because in that role, and once you get to starting to think in those terms, right, that's where I feel you can be pretty comfortable and be competent, can be called competent in that area. But I
gotcha.
think that's
So it's
what
more
it
of
is.
like a certain things that you have to go through, not necessarily like a specific timeline.
Yeah, and I think some of it will basically comes with experience, because unless and until, because the once you do a hands-on project by yourself, right, you won't think about this small thing. You won't care about security much, because again there is no stakes to it. But the moment you work in a corporate which has high stakes, then you have to think of every small thing, and I think that
Yeah.
experience will help you to evolve as a data engineer. So again, that also depends on. It takes some time for sure.
Hmm.
But
Yeah, and what is the typical promotion path like for a data engineer? From entry to the highest position you can hold, what is the average time spent at each level?
uh, so starting with like in Amazon, it's L4, L5, L6, and L7. Again, with Amazon at least, there is a lot of flexibility. So I've seen people who have become from software they have come to data engineers, from data engineer they have become data engineer manager, and from they probably can go to solutions architect. So there is a lot of options there, but in terms of promotion you start with data engineer 1, you become a 2 typically. Then they become a senior data engineer in L6 position, and then I think I've seen data architects. Like I haven't seen that in Amazon as such, but I think in general there are data architects. That is like a
Mm,
principal data engineer, you can say, who kind of think and design the data infrastructure for an org level. And above that, you have most of the leadership positions. But I think these are like typical pathways for a data engineer in terms of promotion. And in terms of how much time typically it takes, I would say probably 1.5, 2 years, or 2.5. Probably it could go to 3 years. For me, it took more year, but I think it takes around 2 years from what I have seen. At least in Amazon. Again, it differs in probably outside, but 2 years, and then probably the time keeps on increasing as you go up,
mm.
uh, because then it takes more time to jump from one level to another.
Gotcha. And we also talked about, I mean, that's a good point, but we also talked about when people come in, what fields people typically come from when they come into data engineering. Would you say that there are specific fields that people go to after they work in data engineering? Like, are there any themes, or can anybody just springboard into anything after being a data engineer?
Uh, Again, I don't know a lot of things like it. I don't know. Again, there is no statistical evidence to it. Like if data engineers are going there, but again, from my experience, I haven't seen anyone switching from data engineering, because I've seen a lot of people. I've seen people becoming data engineering to data science, because that's the route I have observed. But I haven't seen anywhere else. Like if someone is becoming, I've seen a lot of software engineers becoming data engineers,
Hmm.
because again, data is right now it's like growing and highly marketed
Yeah.
term, right? So a lot of people wants to get into it. So, but yeah, I mean, like from data engineer, I have seen a lot of people getting into data scientist. Or if someone is management interested in management, right, they go become data engineer manager. So that's another that's always there. But technical to technical, I think I've seen data science people going for data science.
Gotcha. And Rohit, let me know, are there any books, resources, or programs, certifications that you would recommend to somebody who is interested in getting to data engineering? And maybe are there any that you would not recommend that are popular?
Uh, So I've read, like during the master, I've read a couple of books that really helped me. There's one book on data warehousing. I'll probably send out your list. Maybe you can add it there, but I don't remember. I think there is one for data warehousing, which is by Kimball. I think there's a very nice book about data warehousing. I think that's something which I'll recommend if someone wants to read. It's a pretty old book, but it's a very nice book. And then there was another book that I've read. It's about how to build data intensive applications, distributed applications, something like that. Again, I don't remember. I don't read that much books, to be honest. I haven't read, but that those two books I remember very specifically. For me, like it was very nice. I can send the names afterwards, probably, if you like. Apart from book, I did certifications. If that also, if it's fine, if I can answer that also in this question, because you mentioned books, but also the courses, right?
Yeah,
Books
yeah,
and
yeah.
courses. So I personally did certifications. So I did AWS certifications. One I did with was cloud practitioner. So second one I did for was solution architect. And the reason I personally did it because first one I wanted to get into AWS, because at that time I wanted to get a job anyway. So I was trying to get a cloud support job, which is probably like a easy to get job. So I did for that reason. But then I realized like knowing cloud, right? It's a good leverage that you can have when it comes to sending out resumes or building your profile, because nowadays
Hmm.
again you need to think in terms of what most of the companies are using in their tech stack, and AWS is like one of the very common service that they use. So that's the reason why I did AWS. So that's you can consider it as a course, like probably if you want to do it. but again, not necessarily. And then from courses point of view, I typically didn't buy any course. I used to just like Texas A&M provides LinkedIn Learning, right? Like you get access to LinkedIn Learning. So I used to do just anything, any topic, specific topics that I was interested in. I used to just go and then just type in, for example, advanced SQL. You want to learn about advanced SQL, you can just type in advanced SQL and you get lots of courses. So courses, I won't recommend like any specific course that was really good. There might be, but I don't know that much. I think from courses you can just always go for that specific niche topic, because and anyone who's building a course on around a niche topic will give you like an in-depth knowledge. Because in general there are a lot of courses probably don't add that much value to you. But yeah, I think that will be that two books, certifications, and then some courses at random. Yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah. And so Rohit, transitioning into our last question, I think this is one of the best ones that we also get to ask is what would you tell your younger self when you were at the beginning of your career?
I think yeah, I think one advice or probably one thing that I would always recommend to myself, like if I were to get a chance to go back, is to meet people from. And when I say meet people, again, that is again a very vague term. Like we will end up meeting again. There are a lot of people to meet, but I guess LinkedIn is such a good platform. I think you can extract a lot of value out of it. So if you have a clarity on really want to, or even if you don't have clarity, right, you just want to explore something and to understand what you want to do, just go on LinkedIn, ask people, and then meet them and ask questions. I think that will give you a lot of, because there's a lot of noise right now. There is lot this much information, and you have 80% noise out there, and you are looking for the 10% of information. And navigating through that is very difficult. So, and next, getting insight from an experienced person directly, right? It's really helpful. I did it pretty late, but yeah, that helped me. So that's something I'll probably go back and would like to give that suggestion to myself.
Yeah, basically, for all the listeners, like basically find people like Rohit who, will answer a LinkedIn message and hop on a podcast with you because, and like just tell you more about the job, like more about the industry in general. And so Rohit, if you're open to being reached out to, where can people reach out or follow along with your work and your career?
So I'm currently very active on like not very active, but I always keep like try to be active on LinkedIn. So that's one place I can always reach out to. And I'm not really active on any other social media handle. So I think LinkedIn is the place. If someone wants has any question, they can reach out to.
Yeah, so Rohit Yadav on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, Rohit, that is all we have for you today. Thank you so much. You provided so many insights, not just about data engineering, but you also talked a little bit about some other data jobs, some of the misconceptions that come with those. So we really appreciate you coming on.
Sure, sure. Hey, thanks for inviting. It was good. It was fun.
Thank you.
You just got one episode closer to learning about the world of jobs out there. To explore the rest of our career categories and find your best fit, go to jobdictionary.com to sign up for the beta users waitlist. Then subscribe here to find the next episodes coming out this week. And as always, drop us a comment, review, or message to let us know how we can better attune our episodes to your specific needs. Follow us on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, X, Threads, Pinterest, and wherever else you're on socials to go get our short, snappy preview reels that expose you to new job options every day. Because here at Job Dictionary, we believe your big aha moment can be just one scroll away. Go check it out and get out there. Cheers!